And they pay 100% tax rate,
and the land
like they do in Canada.
That might be, yeah,
or in Europe.
But I think
it's 100%.
To have some of our, I give Mayor Daley the credit for at least being hot again on this and having the vision. We would not like to see our political leaders running for governor draw lines in the sand on this issue.
Why not? Why shouldn't they take a position?
Because I think that it hasn't come out yet. It hasn't. They're taking positions on a.
What facts would you like to know that aren't out there?
I'd like to be able to take a look at 2 or 3 different options as to locations on this. I'd like to be able to see perhaps what the mayor is thinking, what the business community believes long term is going to be good for this city. I mean, the business community is here for hundreds and hundreds of years. Mayors come and go.
So you want full hearings?
Absolutely.
One of the things Donna said about the level playing field is very important. That's the concern I have about a land-based casino in Chicago. 9 other communities and entrepreneurs have made substantial investments following
and substantial profits.
That's true, but they followed the rules that the state of Illinois put in place. And now everyone acknowledges that a land-based casino is a tremendous advantage over a boat.
Let's talk about those 9 for the time being, and it's actually 10 because 1 license is now in limbo. Why should 9 individuals or 9 companies be protected like this way by a state to be profit machines? You're right. It's a monopoly. They have monopoly in their jurisdiction, and they're taking money out of the feeder market. It's not fair competition with other businesses. But Jerry raises an interesting point. I think tomorrow when you have your gubernatorial debate here, you should ask them if they would favor, both gubernatorial candidates, if they would favor allowing the people of Illinois to vote on this issue. I just got back. What do you think the result of that election would be, were it to take place? I think you'd have to ask my political science friends, but I think they're going to say that people in different jurisdictions have seen the pain that has come, the social negatives that have come. I think you're going to see. Well, where are they? I mean, according to Mayor Schock, they're not there. I just came back from Iowa. They have a vote in Iowa. Why don't the people of Illinois have a statewide vote on this? I think it would be really mini referendum here. Would you be in favor of a state referendum on gambling?
Yes, and I think it would, voters would approve it, but there's always this tension. I think this is a very fragile thing. I think people are
well, it's an election. There's always 2 sides.
No, they're queasy about gambling, and I think that's the problem with introducing the new wrinkle of land-based.
So the two of you would favor a referendum. Would you favor a referendum, and would your clients favor a referendum?
Well, here's what I see as the problem with the state referendum. At this point in time, you can't unplug the plug, as it were. In other words, prior to 1990, when this was
wait a minute,
passed,
stop a minute. Why can't you unplug the plug?
Well, because
the state gives you the license, and you have to bring it up for renewal all the time. Why can't you say you can't renew it?
Well,
or we're not granting them anymore.
I think that if you wanted to have a referendum on how the citizens of Illinois felt about having casino gambling in the state, it should have been done prior to 1990. I now think you have companies who've come into the state, they've invested a lot of money in the state, and I think that what you want to do as a state is create a stable regulatory environment, and whether it's the gaming business or any other business, if you start 10 or 12 years after the fact determining that maybe you ought to take a referendum on it, I think you create an unstable business environment.
How about the referendum on whether or not the state should own it or not?
Well, I think
not just whether you should have gambling, but who should own it.
I think that state ownership is an interesting issue, and I think that it actually causes a public policy consideration that I think that our politicians have to determine whether the people do feel comfortable with state ownership, because if in fact we were to have state ownership of a casino, Illinois would be one of the only places where the state would own a casino and compete with private industry owning the other casinos.
Or maybe not, maybe outlaw private ownership.
Well, if you I have to say that I don't think our
heritage... I mean, I'm not trying to put you out of business.
I don't think our heritage...
You can wipe the slate clean. We've done that historically in history. Wait, yeah, right. One moment, please. Jerry has not voted. But wait a minute, I want to make sure I understand your vote. Your vote is no referendum.
Well, is the referendum on public versus private ownership?
We're going to have 2 referenda. Yeah. The first one is on whether we have public versus private, and the other one is whether we should have it at all.
Well, if you want to have a referendum on Chicago public versus private ownership, I would be in favor of that referendum.
Okay.
Yeah. 2 things we don't talk about at the Chamber of Commerce is taxes and referendums. Absolutely not. We have elected officials. They need to get in there and take a look at this and come out with the best decision, and hopefully it will be for an gaming entertainment center in Chicago. so we can.
Who do you think the patrons are going to be of this casino? If you had if you had a pie, how big a part of the pie would go to tourists?
300 to 500 miles, and then internationally. That's just what's great about our. So when we advocated on behalf of this 10, 11 years ago, we talked about the international visitor. I mean, over 1 million coming from around the world into Chicago now.
But what about Chicagoans? Don't you think a lot of them would come?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And they're going to be spending their money there instead of on cars, refrigerators, and computers. You're cannibalizing your tourism
wait a second,
industry.
though. Don't they have a choice to do that?
They have a choice to do that, but remember, it's an addictive behavior, and 27% to 55% of the money.
Well, wait a minute. You said you gambled. Are you addicted to it?
Well, I hope not.
How many times a year have you gambled?
Not much. I call it research, by the way.
We haven't found that. Elgin was the first community to implement a gamblers, before the state did. We set aside part of our dollars for to help those who addicted gamblers. And frankly, every year, a portion of the money's gone unspent. We have not experienced this tremendous, some yes, but not this tremendous amount of addicted gamblers. The addicted gambler can get on an airplane and fly to Las Vegas.
But the addicted gambler may not step forward and say he's an addict.
It's a hidden addiction. It's the fastest growing addiction in the United States. It's comparable to drug addiction. This is not my opinion. This is the National Commission report after report. Sociologists call these video gambling machines the crack cocaine of creating new addicted gamblers, and they look at the ABCs. New addicted gamblers, new bankruptcies up 18 to 34% around
all because of gambling?
And, yes, and directly linked to gambling. And new crime, a new study out of the University of Illinois, not by me, indicates that the third year after these open up, in the feeder market, crime goes up 10% and trends up after that. A study out of Minnesota says crime
he hasn't found that to be the case.
But that's just his local jurisdiction. You got to look at the feeder market.
I mean, all you got to do is go to Las Vegas and take a look at one of the fastest growing cities in America.
Which has the highest crime rate, Jerry.
But take a look at the economic development as a result of that, which they're able to work on that. I mean, I think that there are issues that you deal with, but you can't draw the line in the sand.
But the economic development in Las Vegas is just more gambling.
These are entertainment dollars like every other entertainment. The average loss at the Grand Victoria, the most successful riverboat in the country, is $120. It cost my wife and I more than that to go to a play and dinner in the city of Chicago. Entertainment dollars.
Half of those dollars that are going in there are coming out of people who are losing everything. And we had a hearing on this down in Springfield in 1996. And they were there were people there saying they'd never gambled before. They lost the family farm. I'm telling you, even the pro-gambling people.
But those might be in the extreme
They're not in extreme cases.
I think those are anecdotal stories. I don't think the statistics support what the professor's saying.
Well, since you represent so many...
Excuse me, but the statistics do support this. It comes out of the National Commission. It was sponsored by our own U.S. Senator. These are facts.
Well, let's let Ms. Moore respond to that. And do you have statistics as to what the configuration of the gambling patrons are? How many of them are casual gamblers? How many of them are addicts? How many of them, what's the average amount they spend?
I think the research that's been done by the American Gaming Association is that less than 1% of the population has a compulsive gaming problem. And in that regard, I think that not only the casino companies, but the regulators have all taken steps to make sure that the people that have a problem aren't in the casinos gambling. The casinos spend large amount of money. Illinois just passed self-exclusion rules, so if a person has a problem or if a family member knows of someone that has a problem, they can bring them in, they can get them excluded and prevent them from coming to the casinos.
I want to ask about how these casinos come. How did these 9 people end up getting these licenses? Are there any limits on contributions by gambling interests in Illinois?
Campaign contributions?
Campaign contributions. No. None.
There's no limits in Illinois for campaign contributions in general.
And as far as these particular interests that hold the licenses have to be renewed how often?
Every 4 years at the maximum. The gaming board can renew them annually if they see fit to do that.
And how much is a license?
A license is, by statute, $50,000 for the fee, and then a renewal fee every year.
And how much of the profits go back to the municipalities or the state?
Well, at this point, we're at 50% tax rate. But prior to that, it was a graduated tax up to 35%.
And if the state owned it, the tax rate would be 100% because the state would get all the profits.
That's correct.
Good, yes. Correct.
I'm sorry.
Can I leave you with a thought here? You've all heard of the economic stimulus bill, which was passed. It's a $100 billion bill. Ford Motor Company, consumer companies were trying to get some tax incentives for themselves in that bill, which was fine. At the last minute, the Gambling Association lobbyists slipped in a $40 billion tax write-off for the gambling industry for slot machines. Now that's real patriotic as part of the economic stimulus package. $100 billion, regular companies can't get that. But in Washington, they slipped in a $40 billion tax write-off, and they were asking for $130
the gambling lobbyists are more powerful than the anti-gambling lobbyists?
Extremely powerful.
But the manufacturers,
extremely powerful. So let the people vote.
The manufacturers of slot machines, they're hardworking people making those. I mean, you can't paint them into this with this broad brush that just because they're
the purpose of the economic stimulus package is to reinvigorate the economy. There's nothing reinvigorating about writing $40 billion to write off slot machines.
If Mayor Daley doesn't get his land-based casino, what has to happen to close the budget gap, not only this year, but in years down the line?
Well, I mean, obviously we have to continue to focus on major economic development projects if we can in this state, which is to continue to increase McCormick Place, build O'Hare Airport.
But I mean, to fill budget gaps, don't you need new taxes and cuts?
This won't fill the gap.
The
entire 9 casino votes only.
Well, we filled the time gap. So my thanks to Jerry Roper, Donna Moore, John Kindt, and Ed Schock for being with us this evening. Be sure to be here tomorrow for a special 1-hour edition of Chicago Tonight, when Phil Ponce will be joined by the candidates for Illinois governor, Democrat Rod Blagojevich, easy to say, and Republican Jim Ryan. That's tomorrow from 7 to 8 here on Chicago Tonight. I'm Joel Weisman. Good evening.
What I was saying, they're not going to fill
sorry.
that. The state gap is estimated between $1 and $2 billion.
That's all right.
Illinois,
It's good television.
The state of Illinois got more revenue than all but one.
Closed captioning for this program is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices. This evening's presentation of Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by LaSalle Bank.